The dusty town of Red River had always been a place where secrets hid in plain sight, where broken dreams clung to the old wooden buildings as stubbornly as the desert sand. Into this world came a young woman named Clara, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. She had traveled miles from the east, answering an advertisement that promised security and a new beginning as a mail-order bride. But what the paper didn't tell her was the weight of loneliness, the uncertainty of stepping into a stranger's life, and the silent battles she carried within her heart. Clara stood on the wooden platform outside the station, clutching her small suitcase, her dress wrinkled from days of travel. The townsfolk eyed her with quiet curiosity, whispering behind gloved hands. She tried to stay composed, but her hands trembled. In her chest, her heart pounded like the hooves of wild horses. She was supposed to meet a rancher she had never laid eyes on, a man who had written letters that were simple, practical, and nothing more. Yet here she was, questioning whether she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She felt too scared to step forward, too scared to face the unknown. Then he appeared. His name was Daniel, a rancher who had spent years working the land, his skin bronzed by the sun and his hands rough from endless labor. He was not the kind of man who spoke too many words, nor one who adorned his letters with poetry. But when his eyes fell on Clara, something in him softened. He noticed the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers gripped that worn-out suitcase like it was her last anchor. He walked slowly toward her, not with authority, not with demand, but with a gentleness she had not expected. "You must be Clara," he said, his voice steady, warm like a summer evening. She nodded, but her throat tightened, unable to release the words stuck inside. He noticed her silence, the fear that made her lips press into a thin line. Instead of forcing conversation, Daniel simply extended his hand, not as a demand but as an invitation. Clara hesitated, her mind replaying every warning she had heard about men who sent for wives they'd never met. But in his eyes, she saw no hunger, no impatience, only an honest waiting. She placed her hand in his, and in that small gesture, something inside her eased. The ride back to his ranch was quiet. The wagon wheels creaked, the horses trotted, and Clara stared out at the endless horizon. Her fears swirled louder than any words. What if he turned out to be cruel? What if she could never feel at home here? But then Daniel spoke, breaking the silence. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said, keeping his eyes on the trail. "I didn't send for you to own you. I sent for you because I thought maybe we both needed someone to listen." Clara turned to look at him, surprised. His words weren't rehearsed or polished. They were raw, simple truths. For the first time in weeks, she felt like someone had seen beyond the role of mail-order bride and glimpsed the woman beneath. Days passed, and Clara slowly adjusted to life on the ranch. She watched Daniel rise with the sun, his movements steady, his silence never cold but comfortable. He never demanded her affection, never pushed her into anything. Instead, he gave her space. In the evenings, they would sit by the porch as the crickets sang. He would tell her about the land, about the storms he had endured, about the loneliness of tending to cattle with only the wind as company. And in return, Clara found herself sharing little pieces of her past, her childhood, her longing for freedom, and the reason she had boarded that train even though fear clung to her like a shadow. One night, as the fire crackled inside the cabin, Clara whispered, "I was too scared to come here, too scared to be someone's bride. But you've never asked me for anything I couldn't give." Why? Daniel looked at her, his jaw firm but his eyes tender. "Because love isn't something you demand, Clara. It's something you build. And if all we ever build is trust, then that's more than enough for me." Those words wrapped around her heart, soothing every jagged edge of fear she had carried. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like she had been bought or bartered. She felt like she had been chosen, not for what she could give, but for who she was. As weeks turned into months, laughter began to fill the ranch. Clara found joy in small things: the warmth of fresh bread, the kindness in Daniel's quiet gestures, the way he always made room for her voice at the table of decisions. She realized that her fear hadn't vanished overnight. It had been replaced, little by little, with trust, with a steady love that didn't roar but whispered. And in that whisper, she found strength. Clara had once been too scared to be a mail-order bride, but now she was not afraid of the future, because she knew she wasn't walking it alone. And Daniel, the rancher who listened with his heart, knew that the woman who had arrived trembling at the station had become the very heartbeat of his home. Friends, if you believe in love that grows not from demands, but from listening, from trust, from patience, then this story is for you. And if you want more powerful tales like this one, stories that touch the heart and make you believe in the beauty of human connection, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means we can keep bringing you stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all what it truly means to love. The days on the ranch grew longer as spring gave way to summer, and Clara found herself slowly weaving into the fabric of the land. What once felt foreign now began to feel like home. She learned to feed the chickens, knead dough with steady hands, and even ride alongside Daniel to check the fences. The more she worked beside him, the more she realized that life here was not about grand gestures but about steady choices, choices that required faith. Yet, in her heart, the shadows of doubt still lingered. She wondered if she truly belonged here, or if she was simply surviving another chapter of her life that had been written by fear. Daniel never pressed her, but he could sense the storm that sometimes flickered behind her eyes. One evening, as the orange sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with fire, Daniel turned to her and said softly, "You still carry something heavy. Clara, you don't have to tell me, but I want you to know. I'll be here when you're ready." His patience made her chest ache, and for the first time, she let the walls around her heart tremble. That night, under the quiet hum of crickets, Clara finally spoke. She told Daniel about the life she had left behind, how her father's debts had threatened to sell her into a loveless arrangement back east, how every suitor she'd met treated her like a bargain rather than a human soul. She had boarded that train not because she dreamed of being someone's wife, but because she had nowhere else to run. "I was terrified you'd be the same," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel reached across the table, his rough hands covering hers. "Clara, I never wanted a servant. I never wanted a bargain. I wanted a partner, someone I could share the silence with, someone I could share the storms with. If that isn't what you want, you're free to leave. I'd rather see you happy than see you here against your will." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, not from sorrow but from the shocking kindness of his words. All her life she had been caged by choices made for her, but here, for the first time, she was being given freedom. The days that followed changed something inside her. She rose earlier, not out of duty, but out of desire to walk the land with Daniel. She laughed freely, her voice echoing against the wide sky, surprising even herself. She found joy in small things, the way Daniel always poured her coffee first, the way he mended her dress without comment after she tore it on the fence, the way his gaze lingered not on what she could do but on who she was becoming. Slowly, love rooted itself between them, not sudden like a storm, but steady like rain nourishing dry ground. Yet the true test of that love came one fateful afternoon. Word spread that outlaws had been seen near the edge of the county, raiding ranches, stealing cattle, and leaving families in fear. Daniel knew he had to prepare. He saddled his horse, checked his rifle, and made ready to defend the land. Clara's heart tightened with dread. Memories of helplessness returned, threatening to drown her newfound courage. But when she saw Daniel standing at the door, determined yet calm, something stirred inside her. She realized she did not want to live in fear anymore. She stood beside him, her hands steady as she whispered, "You won't face this alone, not anymore." That night, as shadows lurked beyond the ranch, Clara helped keep the lanterns lit and the doors secured. Daniel watched her with quiet pride, realizing that the timid woman who had stepped off the train had grown into someone strong, someone who had chosen to stand by his side not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The outlaws never came near their land, but in that long night of waiting, something greater happened. Clara defeated the fear that had followed her across states, and Daniel knew their bond was unbreakable. Weeks later, under a sky bursting with stars, Daniel finally asked her the question that had been quietly living in his heart. "Clara," he said, his voice trembling for the first time since she had met him, "will you stay? Not as a mail-order bride, not as someone who felt forced, but as my wife in truth." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She nodded, and with a voice steady as the land beneath them, she replied, "Yes, because you listened when no one else did." You gave me back my choice, and in that choice, I choose you." The town of Red River soon whispered a different story about Clara. No longer was she the frightened girl from the east, but the woman who found her courage on a lonely ranch. And Daniel, the man who had once been defined by his solitude, was now known as the rancher who listened with his heart. Together, they built a life not born from desperation, but from love's quiet strength. And so, friends, the story of Clara and Daniel teaches us something timeless, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is listen, and sometimes the strongest love is the one that grows in silence, watered by trust and freedom. If this story touched your heart, if you believe love can be built brick by brick with patience and kindness, then make sure you subscribe to our channel. Stay with us for more stories that remind us of the courage hidden in every heart and the love waiting to be found in the most unexpected places.